Linc, Flamingo Insurance. What do you want?
Yeah, can we get the auto insurance policy? Hello? Hello?
You don't have to sacrifice service to save with NJM.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in. You are tuned in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central, presented by NJM Insurance. Welcome into Championship Sunday. Today, we are coming to you live from the press box here at Lincoln Financial Field, where in moments, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship. He is EJ Smith. I am Josh Tolentino. Together, we are your Eagles beat reporters for the Philadelphia Inquirer and your host for Game Day Central. EJ, we cover a championship game today. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great, Josh. I feel like we've been waiting for these types of games for a really long time for this team. We knew at some point during the season that they were going to be one of these teams that had a chance to make a special run. And here we are in the NFC Championship game, and, it's kind of right there in front of them. So, yeah, I'm excited for the show, and I'm excited for the game.
EJ, it's crazy, but here we are. It's technically week 21, the NFC Championship, the end of January in the calendar year, and the Eagles, one of 4 teams remaining in the NFL playoffs. EJ, throughout the season, we've been here every single week. Let's remind our viewers and our subscribers, where is the best place that they can find our coverage and our Game Day Central homepage?
Yeah, Josh, that's inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where we want to have a conversation with you. And we wanted that to be a two-way conversation. We'll be putting our analysis in there, what we're seeing from the press box. And we want to hear from you guys as well, what you're seeing on the broadcast, how you're seeing the game play out. You can definitely, like I said, have a two-way conversation with us. And then we take some of those comments and we put them in a segment we do later on. It's my favorite segment. It's called What You Said. It's where we take some of your comments and we kind of break down what you guys are seeing and what you guys are saying. So once again, that's inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. Again, head over there during the show or after the show, to have a conversation with us.
EJ's got us covered. The Game Day Central homepage, again, is inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. Go ahead and head over there throughout the game. We will be able to interact with you as the Eagles, again, host the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship. EJ, jumping right in. What's the latest with this team? I think we've got to start with a bit of a roadmap on how this Eagles team got here. They jumped to a franchise record 14 wins in the regular season. Last week, they topped the New York Giants. It was just a very one-sided showing in the NFC divisional round. And here we are, the NFC Championship. What exactly happened to get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, as you mentioned, like we're at week 21 now. It's unbelievable. But, it's been a long season. And, again, the Eagles have pretty much been dominant the entire stretch. There have been times where, they they faltered a little bit in that December stretch. But for the most part, they have been, very dominant throughout the year, obviously, secured the number 1 seed. And I think when you're looking at where they kind of exceeded expectations and how they sort of, got here. I mean, you have to start with Jalen Hurts and the strides that he made. We can talk about the roster construction. We can talk about the defensive progress. But really the biggest difference between this year and last year, I think, is the progress that Jalen Hurts made and the trust that he's earned, going into a big game like this. This time last year, we were talking about whether or not Jalen Hurts could perform at a high level in the playoffs. And now we're in the NFC Championship, and there are more questions about the other guy than him. So I think it really speaks to the big strides that he's made. And, again, that's a big part of why the Eagles are, one of the Final Four teams playing for a Super Bowl berth.
You mentioned the Eagles being the 1 seed. The 49ers are the 2 seed. It was almost fate at this point, and you and I have covered this throughout the week, really over the past month, EJ, but 2 certainly of the best constructed rosters in the league, and here they meet in the NFC Championship. EJ, earlier in the week, we met with Nick Sirianni, defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, and a phrase they used is, it's going to be good on good. Let's start right there. The Eagles offense versus the 49ers defense. Whatever you are munching on back home, make sure you have an ample amount of it, whether it's popcorn, whatever. because it is going to be good on good when it's Jalen Hurts on the field against this 49ers defense.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers defense ranks at the top in pretty much any metric you can imagine. They're one of the best run defenses in the league. Very, very good against the pass. Have one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinator in the league. And D'Amico Ryan's a former Eagle. Eagles fans will be familiar with him. It's going to be a challenge. I do think that the Eagles have not faced a defense this complete. The 49ers have their difference makers. They've got Fred Warner. They've got Nick Bosa. They've got, Eric Armstead. They've got Talanoa Hufanga. They've got a lot of guys. I'm sorry, I struggled through that a little bit, but they've got a lot of guys who, can really make a difference. But what stands out is that they don't have weakness. They don't have many weak points. They don't have guys who you can really pick on. Most defenses have those guys, but it's a well-coached group, it's a physical group, and it's a talented group. So yeah, we'll definitely be, as you mentioned, good on good. A lot of matchups that you want to key in on, which we'll get to later. But I do think the Eagles will have some advantages, but that speaks to the Eagles' talent more than the 49ers defensive talent, because it's a really good group.
Good on good, EJ. You mentioned some of those highlight defensive players on each level, defensive line, linebackers, and back in the secondary, they have all-pro talent, first team all-pro talent. Again, good on good. Whatever you're munching on back home, get the popcorn ready, because Eagles offense versus 49ers defense is certainly one of the best things to pay attention to today. EJ, flipping over to the other side, you mentioned his name earlier, Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, the 49ers third-string quarterback, set to make a start in the NFC Championship game due to a couple injuries to Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. But the Niners, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, have rallied together 12 straight victories, 7 with Brock Purdy, 8 if you include that Dolphins game when he replaced Jimmy Garoppolo. And they have not lost again in his young career, EJ, but he arrives to Philadelphia facing a vaunted pass rush, the best in the league, a league high 70 sacks. That was the third most in NFL history. I believe the Eagles need just 5 more to top that 85 Bears squad. EJ, with this from all angles, they have 4 pass rushers who finished with double-digit sacks, first team in NFL history to accomplish that feat. Again, the pressure, it's expected to come from all angles, whether it be the interior with Javon Hargrave. That might be a spot to pay attention to, certainly a spot where the 49ers struggled a little bit last week against Dallas. And on the edges, your boy Hassan Reddick, a Temple alum, paired with Josh Sweat and arguably one of the most impactful players in franchise history, Brandon Graham. It's like the 4-headed monster coming for Brock Purdy today.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the 49ers have Nick Bosa, who is like all-world edge rusher, one of the best in the league. Kind of looks like you built an edge rusher in the lab. It would be Nick Bosa. So, I mean, it's like you mentioned, it's like kind of like 2 really, really great edge pass rushing units, and especially edge rushers. So that's exciting to watch for sure. And as you mentioned, like with the 49ers offensive line, they have Trent Williams at left tackle, who is like, another all-pro level talent, definitely a difference maker. The Eagles are really familiar with him because he played in Washington for a long time. But outside of Trent Williams, they don't have, as sure an offensive line as the Eagles do, or, just in general. So as you mentioned, Dallas got a lot of pressure on the interior. I think that whether it's whoever matches up against Trent Williams is kind of have to kind of do like the tough assignment that nobody really wants. But the rest of those positions, those guys can definitely impact the game. It's not hyperbole to say that Brock Purdy hasn't seen a pass rush as good as the Eagles pass rush, because the Eagles pass rush is the best in the league. Obviously Dallas has a good group, but I think that's a good omen for what the Eagles will be able to do today against Brock Purdy.
Yeah, and in addition to him facing a pass rush, arguably that he hasn't seen throughout his young career, only 2 road games for Brock Purdy, at Seattle and at Las Vegas there. Again, Brock Purdy 7-0 as the 49ers starter as he comes into town today at Lincoln Financial Field, looking to have some success against this Eagles defense and the pass rush. EJ, let's transition over to who's hurt, who's healthy. It really is incredible, EJ, but here we are. It is a week 21, technically, the NFC Championship game, January 29th. And the Eagles will have all 22 starters available that they entered in week 1 with. Certainly, there are some dings and bruises across the team, but to have all 22 players, all 11 starters on offense, all 11 starters on defense, healthy and available for this game, it's a pretty incredible feat.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me at the beginning of the season that all 22 of the Eagles starters would be available to them in the playoffs, I would have told you were crazy. I wouldn't have thought that all of other reporters, we probably have a worse injury report than the team did on Friday. So, yeah, I mean, Avonte Maddox coming back. We'll talk more about keys to the game and everything like that. But that's huge for the Eagles. The 49ers like to rotate a lot of guys into that slot position. Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Kyle Juszczyk. And those are a lot of different body types, a lot of different, playing styles. But at the very least, like Avonte Maddox, having him, being able to combat some of those quicker, shiftier guys, and then still having the versatility to use CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot if you need him, I think that's going to be huge for this game. I think, again, we'll talk about the middle of the field, something the 49ers really like to exploit on offense. Having Avonte back is huge. And again, just being healthy, it's like, you mentioned earlier, like these are two of the most complete teams in the NFL, and to not have injuries, it's like they literally almost basically turned injuries off for the Eagles this year, going into this game. That's exactly what fans want to see. It's exactly what everyone really wants to see. These two teams at full strength. Obviously, we'll get to the 49ers injuries. They're a little bit more banged up, but even they're pretty healthy, going into this game. Considering Brock Purdy is a third string quarterback, he's playing it well at least. So, again, these teams are close to full strength, and it's going to be a good matchup.
EJ, sticking right there with Avonte Maddox returning to the lineup. Over a month ago, Avonte Maddox injured his toe at that Dallas Cowboys game on Christmas Eve, EJ. And speaking to the magnitude of his return, what are you expecting, and how will the secondary shift over the past few weeks? We've seen CJ Gardner-Johnson playing at a high level at that slot position. But at the end of the day, I think you have to put your best players out there, and Avonte Maddox, certainly when healthy, is one of those guys.
Yeah, I think you'll see Avonte Maddox back in the slot. CJ Gardner-Johnson can occupy the normal safety spot he played most of the season. And I think that really, like, what you saw from CJ Gardner-Johnson the last couple of weeks is that he can do that. I mean, obviously, we had years of him doing it when he was with the New Orleans Saints. That's the position he played. But it just adds more versatility. I thought Reed Blankenship played really well, in CJ Gardner-Johnson's spot on the back end while he was filling in for Avonte Maddox. But being able to put CJ back on the weak side safety role, just again, it gives them more versatility. He can play a lot of different alignments. And now you've got a couple of guys who can play. Avonte Maddox can, play safety in a pinch. You've got guys who can do different things. And that's going to be important against, a really diverse and effective 49ers offense, being able to disguise looks and being able to kind of get creative with the way that you call your coverages. That's going to be huge. So, yeah, I expect, Reed Blankenship will probably see his role diminish. You'll see more CJ Gardner-Johnson on the back end with Avonte at the slot. And I think that's going to be a big boost for the Eagles secondary.
Rewinding again to that Cowboys game, EJ, you and I were both there in Dallas. It wasn't only Avonte, but Lane Johnson also sustained an injury there. Ended up later being revealed a torn tendon in his groin. EJ, he's playing through this injury. It is going to require surgery eventually whenever the season ends for the Eagles. But last week, as Lane Johnson made his return to the starting lineup there on the right side of the offensive line, you kind of saw him ailing at the beginning of the game, but a very impressive showing. I believe he had 23 pass blocking snaps, did not allow a single quarterback pressure. It's going to be a tough challenge again today here for Lane Johnson.
Yeah, I think he mentioned on the Chris Long podcast that like the tendon like retore in the beginning of that Giants game, and it was actually like good that it did because it was bothering him. It's really unbelievable what he's going through. I mean, when you hear that, it's like, geez. But yeah, you're right. He definitely seemed like he was adjusting to it and kind of struggling through it early in the game, and then kind of settled in a little bit. This is a completely different challenge, with respect to the Giants pass rush, the 49ers, especially with Nick Bosa, who lines up on both sides. He's one of those rare guys who can play on either side just as effectively. I could see the 49ers testing Lane Johnson, especially early, seeing if he can hold up against Nick Bosa. So, I mean, if you're asking me, like, where are my eyes going to be when the Eagles are on offense for the first series, it's going to be on Lane Johnson, especially if Nick Bosa is over him, just to see how he handles that early in the game. The game will probably progress, and maybe it'll be the same deal where it really bothers him early and then he sort of settles in. But yeah, that's definitely a huge matchup to watch. I mean, the 49ers pass rush isn't like the Eagles. Like, the Eagles have so many guys who can beat you. 49ers are really like, the cornerstone is Nick Bosa. He's the guy who's going to get home. So they have to make sure they have they have to account for him And especially if Lane Johnson struggles, it might change the offensive game plan. They might need to send chip blockers his way, or just again, whether it's a shift his way or something like that. So definitely going to impact the game whether or not Lane Johnson can hold up against Nick Bosa early.
Yeah, and Nick Bosa, as you mentioned, if you were to create a pass rusher in the lab, he's sort of what you would end up with, certainly capable of winning one-on-one, but the 49ers, they love to scheme up their pressures, whether it be through stunts and twists. Bosa certainly a big beneficiary from how D'Amico Ryans, former Eagles player, the defensive coordinator there for the 49ers, a lot of success comes from that. We'll see how Lane Johnson holds up. EJ, please catch me up on the 49ers injury front. You mentioned how they're particularly healthy outside of quarterback. What is going on there, particularly or specifically rather, sorry, in the backfield?
Yeah, at running back, they've had both their top two guys kind of banged up. So everyone knows Christian McCaffrey, household name. He was questionable. He's expected to play, but he had a calf injury. Didn't practice the most of the week, but ended up practicing on Friday. Elijah Mitchell didn't practice all week with a groin injury. He's a second string running back, and he's an important part in that offense. You hear second string running back, and you go, well. They have Christian McCaffrey available, but Elijah Mitchell plays a lot because Christian McCaffrey lines up so many different places. And, he's kind of like, he plays a lot. So, he didn't practice all week. He has a groin injury. It's questionable coming in. We'll see if he can go and how affected he is by that, if he is able to go.
It's just magnificent again, EJ, for both teams, specifically again with the Eagles. At this point of the season, all 22 starters available for the NFC Championship game. EJ, let's transition over to our favorite segment. It is called What You Said. A reminder to all of our viewers back home, you can submit your comments and questions at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. We'll have a chance to read them. If the Eagles advance and win this game, advance to the Super Bowl, we'll have a Game Day Central show there in Phoenix, Arizona, Glendale, Arizona, and we'll have a chance to read your comments and questions in our segment called What You Said. EJ, our first comment comes from Bruce, who says, Brock Purdy, meet Hassan Reddick. Welcome to the NFL, kid. EJ, we alluded to this earlier. We acknowledged it, but really, when it comes to Hassan Reddick and you think about what he's produced over the past 3-4 years, he's really risen to the top of tier of NFL pass rushers.
Yeah, it's one of the first year that he was, super productive in Arizona. I think everybody thought, well, maybe this was a flash in the pan. He had to sign a prove-it deal with Carolina. He did it again. And by the time the Eagles signed him, I think we were all sort of wondering, he's one of the most productive guys in the league, but can he do it again? And he's just proven it time and time again that he is one of the most productive guys. I've talked before about how sacks are kind of like a fickle thing. Sometimes you might have a down year on sacks because it's more about pressures or anything like that. But Hassan does. He seems to have a real skill for finishing pressures, not only just finishing it, but forcing fumbles. And, we've seen that play out this year. I think that he is again, like you see every team that makes it this far, most of them have, a difference maker on the edge. Most teams have that, Bosa or, whoever it might be. They've got one of those guys who might be, who you really have to account for. And Hassan Reddick has been that guy for the Eagles. Obviously, Josh Sweat's played really well. Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, all those guys have played really well. But, every team does seem to have one of those guys. And Hassan Reddick has fit that bill this year. So, credit to him and credit to Howie Roseman because it's a good deal they have him on relative to the production that he had this year.
It's been a perfect homecoming for Hassan Reddick. Certainly, he would like more recognition, some personal recognition. He's alluded to that on social media, whether it be through Twitter or Instagram, or even just in our conversations. He's sort of demanding his respect, are words that he has used. If he's got Brock Purdy on the ground a few times here throughout today's game, it's the big stage, the NFC Championship game. Welcome here, Hassan Reddick. EJ, our next question comes from McSougal, who says, George Kittle could destroy us. He's a matchup nightmare for our defense, and then we lose our pass rush advantage. EJ, what are you going to be watching here when it comes to George Kittle? We're so used to watching Dallas Goedert and how he can dominate a game. George Kittle, when you think about the top tight ends in the league, Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce's brother, George Kittle is not far behind him. What are your expectations today on how the defense might contain George Kittle?
Yeah, I mean, CJ Gardner-Johnson's definitely a candidate for that if they're in man coverage. I mean, but the funny thing is, like, you could have said this about any, like, 4 or 5 guys on the 49ers offense, whether it's Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, or, even Kyle Juszczyk can make plays. So, I think the biggest thing, if you ask me what I'm watching with Kittle, we have to figure out where he is. I mean, a lot of those guys line up in a lot of different alignments, whether they're in 21 or 12 personnel. I think this is going to be a big day for the Eagles linebackers. We've talked about that group and, kind of how they've exceeded expectations, TJ Edwards and Kaiser White in particular. It's going to be a tough day for them. I mentioned it earlier. The 49ers, they target the middle of the field more than anybody. The whole offense is kind of built around getting guys in space over the middle of the field, letting them operate after the catch. And these guys are tough to tackle. I mean, George Kittle's incredibly tough to tackle. It is like Kyle Shanahan schemes these guys open a lot. So whether it's Kittle or Ayuk or Brandon or Debo Samuel, all those guys are threats after the catch. And again, the Eagles are going to have to be disciplined to make sure they know where they are, that if they are in pre-snap motion, what that means for the structure of the defense. And then if they do get the ball, you got to get them on the ground. So, I think that Kittle is, at the top of that, probably one of the hardest guys to tackle in the league. And that's going to be a big challenge for the Eagles defense.
Yeah, you think about the 49ers defense, the Eagles defense, very similar. Our colleague Jeff McClain posed the question to Nick Sirianni and regarding the two defenses and their similarities. And Sirianni joked back with us reporters earlier in the week, saying kind of like Gannon's defense, right? So George Kittle is zone similar to Goddard, but just the physical presence. EJ, one more spot I'd like to point out. And you acknowledged this earlier, but it's going to come down to communication. Kyle Shanahan, the coach, big scheme guy, very, very big on those pre-snap motions. It'll be up to the defense, whether it be the secondary, those linebackers, Kaiser White and TJ Edwards, to be able to communicate before that ball is snapped into Brock Purdy's hands. EJ, let's go over to our predictions. It's almost time. I want to hear yours, but first, let's go to some thoughts from Inquirer beat reporter Jeff McClain.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks for joining me here at GameDay Central to talk about the Eagles versus the 49ers in the NFC Championship. Long story short, I'm going to pick the Eagles. I think that they ultimately have a deeper squad. Obviously, home field advantage will play into their favor. And I think looking at the quarterbacks, it's just tough for me to see Brock Purdy advance it to the Super Bowl, especially with Jalen Hurts and the way he's played all season. But if we look at a little closer at the matchups, so let's start with the Eagles offense versus the 49ers defense. I mean, this is obviously going to be the toughest test for this unit for Jalen Hurts in his entire career. The 49ers are stacked at all three levels. They have an all-pro, first-team all-pro at each level, Joey Bosa. They have up front, he's going to obviously draw a lot of attention. Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, they're going to each have to contend with him as he pretty much flips on each side. And what will the Eagles do? Well, they have to kind of expend an extra player to help those guys in pass protection. But it's not just Joey Bosa on this team. They have other guys up front. Armstead in the middle will be a guy that they'll have to contend with and maybe pay a little more attention to. Basically, in my opinion, the linchpin of this defense is Fred Warner, middle linebacker. I mean, this guy can do it all, and he's all over the field, and he's smart. He's basically the eyes and ears out there for defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, who everybody in Philadelphia knows, having played here for 4 years. And, the Eagles, I think, though, have an opportunity to move the ball against this defense, despite its strengths. Maybe not so much on the ground. I think that's going to be tough. I mean, obviously, Jalen Hurts and the +1 factor in the run game is going to clear some space for Miles Sanders and the other running backs. But I think that they have an opportunity to stretch the field against the 49ers. They've been susceptible at times to the long play, especially when they're in cover 1 or cover 3 and they have man coverage on the outside. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown should have opportunities on the outside. And I think Dallas Goedert, in certain zones, Dallas Goedert is a guy I think that the Eagles will certainly go to and try to get started. And I think the Eagles can do enough to get ahead. It's key for them to get ahead. If they can get ahead, then they can kind of rely on a little bit of the balance that we've seen from this offense when it's been its most potent. On the other side of the ball, pretty much even Steven, the 49ers offense is strong. The Eagles defense, as we know, is strong. Maybe not as strong as the other sides when you pit the Eagles offense versus the 49ers defense, but it's an interesting matchup. Brock Purdy has played well in his 7 starts. I don't want to take anything away from this kid, but I think we saw some cracks in the armor last weekend against the Cowboys. And at times when he didn't have first or second reads, when he was forced into 3rd and longs, the Cowboys were able to kind of get after him and make him a little skittish in the pocket. And I think the Eagles, having one of the best pass rushes, will have an opportunity to force some negative yard plays with him, because he has an knack to kind of turn back and scramble. And we know how the Eagles defensive ends, Hassan Reddick, Josh White, those guys can get upfield, and they can basically contain the edges and force him. And I think the Eagles also have an advantage up in the middle versus that 49ers interior offensive line. So Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Ndamukong Suh. I think those, and Milton Williams, don't forget about him. I think those guys can get after him too, force him to have force the offensive line to kind of walk back into Brock Purdy's face and force him to make some plays on the outside. Now, that being said, the 49ers have a really good offense. Their run offense is strong. If they can get things going on the ground, if they can get get into a lot of 3rd and shorts and control the clock, then that's going to kind of even the scales and make it difficult for the Eagles' explosive offense to get on the field. And we've seen other teams do that. Lesser teams do that against the Eagles. So that's going to be key. The Eagles get behind, and all of a sudden this becomes a little slog that continues into the second half. And that's where I think the Eagles can have some problems and can potentially lose this game. But ultimately, it's just hard for me to see Brock Purdy getting into the Super Bowl. I know if we're looking at it from a big picture point of view, that's kind of how I view it. Jalen Hurts, the way he's played, I think that'll be the deciding factor. Ultimately, quarterback positions, as we know, are so important. Obviously, these two aren't going to go up against each other, but I just feel like Brock Purdy, under the pressure of playing in Philadelphia, will make 1 or 2 mistakes that'll tilt the scales in favor of the Eagles, and I have them winning 24-20. So that's it here for me of Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Back to you guys at Game Day Central.
Thank you to Jeff McClain for his thoughts on today's NFC Championship game. EJ, let's get yours. Give me a player to watch out for on offense and defense. I'm going to jump ahead of you. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, if there was a matchup worth exploiting against this tough 49ers defense, arguably one of the best in the NFL, I think it's got to be on outside, especially against a D'Amico Ryans-led defensive unit that loves those zone coverages, specifically cover 3. That might be a spot there to take advantage with Devontae and AJ on the outside.
I see how you did that. You were like asking me, and then you're like, what? Let me sneak mine in really quick. So what? I'm gonna kind of cheat here. If you're going AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, I did this last week too. I'll go Jalen Hurts, the guy who has to throw him the ball, because I agree. I think the 49ers, they run a lot of cover 3 and a lot of cover 4. They kind of manipulate the looks with the safeties. It's going to be a tough day for Jalen Hurts to kind of figure out what coverage they're in based off of that, and B, Fred Warner, like we talked about him earlier, as like he's all world. He's an unbelievable player. Gives them a lot of flexibility to disguise coverages and to make the picture, a lot less clear for Jalen Hurts. So, but that said, when they're in cover 3, when they're in man coverage, the 49ers are susceptible to deep passes. They're not susceptible to a whole lot. They still limit a lot of explosive plays. They're a really good defense, but if you can get them, it's, over the top. So I think that the way the Eagles are going to win this game is by running the ball. We talked earlier about how the 49ers are like, one of the best run defenses, and they're really productive against the run, but they haven't seen an offense that has a QB run game like the Eagles. They haven't seen an offense that has that numbers advantage. So I think the Eagles will be able to run the ball. I think that's going to be a big part of this, and then they're going to be able to take shots off of that. So I don't know if do you want my prediction now, or do you want me to just stick with the offensive stuff?
Well, we'll tease our prediction here in a little bit, just building on your analysis with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Certainly, Jalen Hurts, it's going to be up to him to recognize when they are in those cover 3 matchups, which presents one-on-one on the outside. And really, EJ, it's kind of been a theme. It feels like whenever one player doesn't get his desired amount of touches in a game, you think about week 1, Devontae Smith didn't really get the ball. Week 2, first pass, Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown, he's had such a great year. He set a new record for franchise receiving yards in a single season. There haven't been many games necessarily where AJ wasn't a huge impact. But I do remember EJ the end of November after Thanksgiving against the Packers. The Eagles were running it so well. 350 plus rushing yards. That was a season high. AJ, I think he only had 3 or 4 catches that game. I remember very, very specifically the next game against the Titans, his former team. He popped off. You just go back and watch the tape. That might be the case again heading into this week. If anyone remembers last week's game, AJ Brown didn't get his amount of touches. And EJ, you actually talked to him earlier in the week. He says if he gets 100 catches in a game, he's going to want 101. Certainly going to look to get him involved early if the Eagles want to take an early lead. One of your keys to victory. EJ, who is a player on defense that you are watching out for today against this explosive 49ers offense?
Yeah, well, it's tough to determine which edge rusher I think will be able to make a big impact. So I'm going to leave the edge rushers alone. Give me Javon Hargrave from the interior. Like you mentioned, Dallas got pressure from the inside. I think the Eagles can, definitely take advantage of Mike McGlinchey, local guy, but, I think that, whoever is matched up against him will probably be able to get pressure. But, again, I don't know if that'll be Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick. I don't know who's going to, take the tough job of trying to get past Trent Williams. But yeah, I think Javon Hargrave is going to be a good bet. I think that, if the Eagles can get out to an early lead, as Jeff mentioned, this game changes. This game really changes and makes Brock Purdy drop back and pass the ball. I think he is the type of guy that if you can get to him, you can affect him. We haven't seen him affected too much, but I do think that that's kind of the formula for the Eagles. So yeah, give me Javon Hargrave.
EJ, I'm going to double dip. Last week, I think James Bradbury was one of my picks to click. I'm going to go there again. If the Eagles are able to get out to an early lead, force Brock Purdy into those drop back situations, we imagine that the Eagles might apply some pressure onto him. The secondary certainly could be a beneficiary from that. If Brock Purdy tends to go those flats, those in-breaking routes, look for James Bradbury, Darius Slay, maybe even C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the NFL's interception leader, to have a big day. So to recap, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, E.J. goes Jalen Hurts, and Javon Hargrave, and I've got the secondary as your players to watch out for. EJ, the moment has arrived. Give me your prediction for today's NFC Championship game. Who do you have advancing to the Super Bowl to represent the NFC?
I won't give you the preamble. I'll leave you in suspense. I have the Eagles winning. I do think there's a world where the Eagles win this game handily. If they get out to an early lead and kind of make the 49ers offense a little more one-dimensional, I think that this could be, a convincing, double-digit type win. If it's not that way, I think the Eagles can win a tight game against this team. They just have, a few matchup advantages to exploit. They've got the talent, to match up against a team like this. So, the Eagles will reign victorious. The home field advantage is a big part of this too. I really do. I think the Eagles offense can score against this 49ers defense. I know how good the 49ers defense is. I know it's a talented group, but I just think that the Eagles match up well against them. I think that they have, the ability, the quarterback run game to kind of neutralize that 49ers run defense. They've got the wide receivers on the outside to win their one-on-one matchups, as you mentioned. I think they'll be able to put up points. So, yeah, I think I put Eagles 34, 49ers 28. I do think that that's, about what I'm expecting. I think it'll be a higher scoring game than people are expecting. Because, again, I think the Eagles offense matches up well against this defense. Who knows? Maybe I'll be totally wrong. Maybe it'll be, a 14-10, knockdown drag out. But I do think that, good offense this time of the year usually does prevail over good defense.
EJ, as a beat reporter, we don't write many first-person columns. We've got 4 columnists here on site being able to provide that type of coverage. This week, I got to write a column rewinding back to my preseason prediction. One of the very few back in September thought the Eagles had the pieces to put it all together and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I think I've got to stay with my pick. I have a slimmer margin than you, though. I think I've had about the Eagles winning by a field goal or so. So we'll see exactly how it plays out. Certainly one of the toughest matchup here for the Eagles as the San Francisco 49ers come to town. EJ, before we wrap up, any final thoughts before the Eagles again host the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship?
Not too many. Field looks good. It looks like fans are starting to file in here. So yeah, I'm excited for the game. I guess we really should. We should thank you guys for following us along this whole season. We don't know if the season will be over yet, but yeah, if it is, then obviously you'll be disappointed. But yeah, we definitely want to thank you guys for following us all season.
Yes, EJ, thank you again to all of our viewers for tuning in. EJ, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I saw last night, 11:30. There were already fans. 11:30 p.m. Fans were already camped out in the Xfinity lot, starting their tailgate. They had some pig, pork, barbecue. They had, it seemed like everything. What's your go-to tailgate spread if you're watching a Temple football game or something that
Oh,
you're
it's
tailgating
brisket.
at?
It's always brisket. Homemade brisket's like the king in my house. You can ask my wife. We have it probably more than she wants to have it, and it's always impractical because you have to make so much of it. But that's like my favorite food. So yeah, I'm jealous of all the tailgaters that get to enjoy it while we're in here working.
And there we go. The fans have been tailgating for 12 plus hours. If EJ was out there with them, he is throwing on a good brisket on the grill. And also, not a cheap ticket, EJ. I think the
Whew.
cheapest actual secondary market tickets, as we've reported throughout the week on the Inquirer, $700 just to get a standing room ticket at Lincoln Financial Field. Is expecting to be a great show here today in South Philadelphia. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central, sponsored by NJM Insurance. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day to follow with us throughout the game, as we'll continue the conversation on our Game Day Central homepage. Who knows, if the Eagles advance and we are in Arizona, we'll have another Game Day Central show, and we'll read our comments in our favorite segment called What You Said. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Game Day Central. Enjoy the game and happy Championship Sunday.